I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we revisit the disappearance of Maura Murray and talk about just what Bill Rausch was doing the day she disappeared. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my stalwart co-host, Alice.
That makes me sound like I'm ready to go to war or something.
Well, you know, we're talking Maura Murray, so you may have to be ready to go to war.
Am I who you want on your team? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, all the teams. Yeah, welcome everybody to this episode. This is a short one, so by the time you are listening to this, it will be a new year. 2020 will be behind us. 2021 will have begun. A bright, shiny new year to leave this dark and depressing one behind. But it being the holidays when we're recording this one is going to be kind of short, so it won't be as long as some of our other episodes. We promise we'll be back next week with a full episode, but we did want to go ahead and do something on Maura Murray because Alice and I have been, if you guys have listened to this podcast, you know that we go way back, as far back as our podcast goes. Really, it's not that old yet, but we go way back with the Maura Murray stuff. It was one of the first big cases that we did. We're very active in the Maura Murray online community, if you can use the word community to describe it. We had somebody who emailed us today who's a listener, and they didn't really know anything about Maura Murray, and so I kept talking about the Maura Murray community, and they said they went online to sort of take part in it, and it was just this war with everyone attacking each other and calling each other names and threatening each other and all this other stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the Maura Murray community.
I can't believe you introduced someone to it.
I didn't mean to. It was an
Yeah,
accident. I mean, look, passions run high in the Maura. If I ever disappear, I hope people are as passionate about my disappearance as they are about Maura Murray's disappearance. So that's sort of my take.
I'm just gonna take the tact of that I've been taking, which is to stay silent about this. So
No,
this episode
your
is
name
all
always
Brett.
gets brought up.
I've heard that and I've seen that. Thanks for thinking about me when I'm not there.
Yeah. You're like the pure angel of the podcast, and I'm the evil devil. So
Only
it's like,
because
what
I
would
haven't
Alice think
spoken.
about that?
For all of you guys wondering, I'm very disappointed in Brett constantly.
Constantly. My online antics are a source of eternal shame for Alice.
Except, well, no, there's no shame with respect to Christmas movies that you watch. That's definitely, fantastic.
That's true. I have been keeping people up to date. Today I'm actually watching a Hanukkah movie. So,
I don't think I've
be
seen a Hanukkah movie.
Trying to broaden my horizons, be multicultural, really experience other things.
I think someone recommended The Christmas Lodge, and I just want you to know that I have it queued up. And when my kids are asleep, I lay in bed and pretend to sleep, but really what I'm doing is headphones in, watching Christmas movies on my phone. It's glorious.
Yeah, I was watching one, and I posted about it online last night. I don't even know if I posted about this one. This might have been a different one, but it was about this doctor who, she used to be in the military. And I know everybody who's listening to this is like, we don't care, get to the Maura Murray stuff, but sorry, you're stuck with this. She's in the military, and she gets out of the military, and she doesn't want to stay in one place, and she doesn't want to get too attached to her patients, and it's all because one of her patients died. And she goes to this little small town, and of course, meets the love of her life and all this other stuff. But towards the end, something really sad happens, and man, I don't want to say I was crying, but I might have been crying just a little bit when the sort of dramatic climax happened. So I'll look up the name of that one and post it on Twitter in case you guys miss it. I mean, I know it's January 5th or something when this comes out, but it's never too late for Christmas movies. So hold on to Christmas
Hey, you
movies
know
as long
what?
as you can.
Because of COVID this year, Hallmark did the Christmas in July where they played all their Christmas movies this summer. So I feel like we've been through enough. We can watch Christmas movies whenever we want to.
We need a long Christmas. I agree 100%. And let me also say, when COVID is over, we all need a vacation. And the problem's going to be everybody's going to act like, no, you need to go back to work because you've had a year-long vacation of working at home and all that stuff. And that is BS. Everybody needs a vacation. This is my position. You know, I'm calling on Congress now to pass a law giving everyone a week-long vacation whenever COVID is declared over. So support me on that.
I'm gonna add to that bill that there's a camp where you send your kids so that you have a real vacation away from your kids.
Even better. that way, all the kids who missed out on camp, they can go to camp, and the parents can get a week off. It'll be wonderful.
Perfect.
It'll be beautiful. Great for everybody's mental health. It'll be worth the cost.
Instead of virtual school, they'll have virtual parents. We'll call once a day.
Exactly. There you go. We need more of those camps.
I'm pretty sure
Summer
that
camps,
we should go to Congress. We're great at this.
I mean, I'll go to camp. I'm fine going to camp if the kids want to stay here. That's fine. I can go to camp.
All right. Anyway, people who have tuned in from Maura Murray are like, they feel like we've just pulled an April Fool's on them.
You know, I feel like part of our show is about alienating people who would not like our show. And one of the ways we do that is we talk about random things for the first few minutes. Because some people, they just hate that. It drives them crazy. We get things on YouTube all the time. I would have loved to have listened to this, but I couldn't get through the first 3 minutes of banter. And it's like, well, then you're not really cut out for our show. If you can't get through the first 3 minutes of banter, then just, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. You can go listen to somebody else. But anyway.
I had a friend who, like someone who, knows me first pre-podcast, and he was like, I really like your show, and no matter what anyone says, I think the things you have to say are interesting. And I was like, oh, was that a criticism? Oh my God, thanks.
thanks I guess. And we got to kind of pad the beginning time here because we don't have like a full hour.
We have approximately 38 seconds of factual information to discuss, which will turn into maybe 24 months of Twitter war.
Well, isn't that the truth? I can already feel the attacks coming. So to get to the point, apologies to those of you out there who hated that last 9 minutes of discussion. If you follow the Maura Murray case, you know that one of the big things that people argue about a lot is Bill Rausch, who was Maura's boyfriend in 2004 when she disappeared. And there are people, Bill Rausch was her significant other. Everybody knows when crime happens to someone, the significant other is always considered. And there are people who want's probably a strong word, but believe that Bill should be looked into and that it needs to be determined one way or another. Could he have been involved in Maura Murray's disappearance? And there are sort of two camps to this. There are the people who think Bill could have been there on February 9th when she disappeared and could have had some part in her disappearance. There are other people who think it's possible, and I think James Renner is probably one of the main people in this camp who think that Bill Rausch, after he came up there to look for Maura, something could have happened during that period related to her disappearance. We are going to talk about the first question, and that question is, could Bill Rausch have been in New Hampshire that night when Maura disappeared? And the thing that people always say, and that I have said multiple times on Twitter, is he could not have been there because he was in Oklahoma at Fort Sill, where he was stationed as an artillery officer. And for a long time, people have argued about whether or not that's true, whether or not he could have gotten away, whether or not he might not have been there. They've argued about the fact that they don't think he could have gotten emergency leave as quickly as he got it, or that he couldn't have gotten it at all to go look for his girlfriend, who was, at the time, just sort of a DUI walk away. And that has led people to believe that this story that Bill has told, which is that he was in Oklahoma. He was on Fort Sill. He heard about Maura's disappearance. He went to his commander. He got permission to leave. He flew to New Hampshire, and he spent the next couple weeks looking for her. There are people who have questioned that story and have really pressed for evidence that that's what happened. And so during the summer, Alice and I started, the thing about it is, if Bill was there, and if his story is accurate, there are people who can support that story. And so Alice and I started looking for people who would have been witnesses to this. And these would have been the people primarily who Bill would have had to speak to about permission to leave Fort Sill. And it's harder than you might think to figure out who is in a command position at a military base 16 years ago, but we had sort of pulled a bunch of different names. Some of them were retired, some of them were generals, and we sent a lot of sort of random emails to these people. Not surprisingly, none of them responded. But in around, I don't know, Alice, was it about August or so?
That's right. It had been a while since we'd been trying to find someone to speak with.
Right. And about August, there is a personality on Twitter and on Reddit who's done they've done a lot of investigation. They're very committed to the Maura Murray case. They are, I guess, controversial with some folks in the community. You got to remember the Maura Murray community is just riven with different factions. On Twitter, this individual's Twitter handle, if you want to follow them, is at Dr. Haas, MN, and Haas is spelled Haas. And this has been somebody who's spent a lot of time looking into this case. I have an okay relationship with him. I think I have a good relationship with him. We argue about some stuff, but pretty reasonable guy, generally speaking. A lot of people don't like him, but whatever. That's Maura Murray community. In any event, this individual was able to get in touch with someone who he claimed was Bill Rausch's commanding officer, and that this person confirmed for him that Bill Rausch had been present at Fort Sill, and that essentially Bill Rausch's story was legitimate. And when he did that, Twitter erupted and Reddit erupted in warfare. As Alice said, this podcast will probably create another 2 years of it. People yelling at each other and people not believing him. And there are reasons, not necessarily not to believe him, but to be skeptical of things that come out in the Maura Murray case. Around that time, someone attempted to perpetrate a hoax on James Renner, went so far as to call in a tip to the cold case unit. James Renner was able to figure out that person was lying based on their telephone. But that's the kind of thing that happens. And so there were people who believed that this so-called commander was also a fictitious entity. Either this individual on Twitter had made this up, or this person had pulled a hoax on them. And so a lot of people didn't believe it. And enter us at this point. Because there are people, for whatever reason, who view us as sort of a independent, neutral party in a lot of the battles that go on in Twitter. And so
I'm definitely neutral.
Alice is definitely neutral, and I think everybody agrees on that.
I'm definitely neutral. I think those of you who've heard past episodes know that I actually knew almost nothing about Maura Murray before we did our episode on it, which I know is shocking, but that is true. So I have no vested interest whatsoever, except to follow up on facts. When facts are said, what do you do in the court of law? You have to have evidence and corroborating evidence, witness testimony to support it. And so that's what I'm interested in.
So Dr. Haas MN on Twitter was kind enough to share with me the name and telephone number of this individual that he spoke with. And this was back, like I said, August, early September. And the first thing we did was nothing. So for the last
we were busy.
3
It was
months,
a little busy.
We were busy, but there was method to our madness as well. For the last 3 months, we sat on this because if this guy was some sort of hoax, we we wanted this to die down, to sort of disappear, and then just spring it on the guy and call him out of the blue and see whether or not he was still running the hoax or whatever. So we kind of just let this go. And people have been arguing about this for the last 3 months, but we let it go anyway. And recently, though, we decided to go ahead and follow up on this and call this individual. Here are my caveats for this. We are not going to tell you his name. We're not going to tell you his phone number, obviously. We are going to tell you about this person, the research we did into him, and the discussion we had with him, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you believe this is true. Sorry, I know that's not going to satisfy some people, but we're not going to open this guy up to everybody on Twitter, or everybody interested in Maura Murray calling him. I think he would hunt us down and murder us if we did that. And
I
that
think
would be understandable.
I think he can, because he has the training.
Yes. But before I get into what he said, I want to give you some of the things we did to sort of attempt to confirm that this person is who they said they were. The first thing we did was we ran a Spokio search on the phone number that we were given to see whether or not it would come up with the same name that we were given. It did. And in fact, the phone number had been associated with that person for quite some time. So the chances that this is a recent fabrication are pretty low. I mean, this person would have had to years ago get this number under this name to be able to pull that off. We also did a Spokio report on this person so we could identify whether or not they were in the places that they should have been at the time, and they were, in fact, living in Oklahoma at the time in 2004. The age matches what the age should be. We also ran down some of their family members to see whether or not their family members were where they were supposed to be. They all were. We were able to find this person in the congressional record, receiving numerous promotions. Some of you don't know this. I don't know why you would if you weren't in the military or involved in this, but as crazy as this may sound, in order to become, say, a major or a lieutenant colonel in the military, you actually go through a nomination process. I mean, it's all pro forma, but your name goes up to Congress and you are confirmed as a lieutenant colonel. And we were able to find this person as they sort of made their way up the ranks over the years. And by 2000, they were a lieutenant colonel. And by 2004, they had been assigned to field artillery at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. We were able to find a document from Fort Sill, so a standard document for that people would fill out for various reasons, and their name was on this document. So everything checked out, is what I'm saying. That this person was the person that they were presented to us as, which is the person who would have been commanding the unit, commanding the battalion that Bill Rausch was assigned to at the time.
Yeah, and, citing all those records, because those are all verifiable sources. They are public records. Congressional records are available on Westlaw, on Congress's website, too. I find that a little more difficult to navigate. But we say all that to say that the type of research we just did is what anyone can have access to. And I point that out because I think a lot of people say, well, there's no way I can verify things, so I'm just going to continue to spout out that this is fact. And we'd like to say that that's false. You don't have to have legal training to do research online like this, right? You don't really go to law school to learn anything. Well, at least I didn't. But I think this is important because it shouldn't just be up to lawyers to verify facts, especially if there's public record to back it up one way or the other. That's just my pitch for, evidence.
Now, of course, you'll have to figure out his name if you want to do that, but because we're not going to tell you. But
sorry, I meant that generally whenever people tweet online.
That's true.
That's my soapbox. I'll get it off. I'll get off of it now.
So in any event, we talked to this guy, and I got to say, the phone call with him was exactly what you would expect, calling a retired member of the military out of the blue as not someone he knows to talk about something that happened 16 years ago. I don't think he was exactly happy to hear from us. He It wasn't the longest conversation in the world. He was very frank, and he was very abrupt, and he was very direct. But what he told us does comport with the story that Bill Rausch has always said. He started off from the beginning. We asked about his relationship with Bill. He said he wasn't his friend. It was purely professional, and they had no relationship outside of their professional relationship. They have not spoken to each other in a very long time, and he hasn't really thought about Bill Rausch much since this happened. The reason he remembered it was because it was so unusual. It was something that he had just not seen before. Now, as I said, he was the lieutenant colonel. The story that Bill Rausch tells is that he went to his immediate commander, and that immediate commander turned him down when he asked to be able to leave. That commander was a captain. So in order to overcome what his captain had told him, he had to go to his battalion commander, which was a lieutenant colonel. And it was really this gentleman's decision whether or not he was going to let Bill Rausch leave. And he noted some things about why his initial, when Bill initially came to him, his thought was, I'm not going to do this. A couple things as we start this off. One is the distinction between advanced leave and emergency leave. People have always said, and I think Bill may have even said, that he was given emergency leave to go look for Maura. And a lot of people have questioned why he would have received emergency leave, and they've looked at the regs, and the regs don't really support that. And my position's just always been, well, yeah, but if the colonel says you can do it, you can do it. But Bill did not get emergency leave. He got advanced leave.
Right. And, what was interesting is this lieutenant colonel said that the first thing he said to Bill when he asked for this leave was, no, go back to your commander. And he wanted to just end the conversation there. And he had mentioned, without us even prompting him to specify what kind of leave, this lieutenant colonel said it was advanced leave. And we dug into it a little bit, and we said, what's advanced leave? And he says it's exactly what it sounds like. Advanced leave is simply you don't have enough leave. Maybe you're too junior. Those of you who may have just started a job, you know how you accrue hours for vacation per paycheck. If you just started somewhere, maybe you have like half a day saved up. So he said that Bill didn't have enough leave. So if he were to take leave, he'd have to have indebted leave, advanced leave. You're taking out a loan on your future leave, which means you have to pay it back by working, and you'll have a negative amount of leave. And as you work and each paycheck you get however much leave, it goes against the debt or advanced leave you were taking.
And the colonel said that this was not something he would often do. This is not something he liked to do because soldiers would get into trouble. They would use up all their leave. They would come and ask for advance leave. They'd get the advance leave, and then they would never actually have any leave. They would always be in the hole, and every time anything came up, they'd have to get more advance leave. So it wasn't something he liked to do. And his initial thought was, no, I don't think we should do this. And Bill played a card that I think is interesting. I think it actually explains some things that happened later on that people have questioned. He told the colonel that this was his fiancée, and his fiancée was missing, and he needed to go look for her. That's a lie, right? They weren't engaged at the time. I think Bill's mother subsequently described them as engaged to be engaged, which I think was sort of a retcon to cover this up. Like Bill had to tell his colonel that they were engaged, so we need to keep that story going. And look, I don't blame Bill for that. I think it was a white lie. I think it was something that he knew if he wanted to get this, it couldn't just be his girlfriend. It needed to be more. It needed to be his fiancée. I also asked the colonel whether or not emergency leave was on the table, and he said the same thing a lot of people have said on Twitter, that no, emergency leave was not on the table because he didn't fit the criteria. And he was just very clear-cut about that.
And specifically, he said the criteria was it wasn't someone like in his immediate family who had passed away, which I found interesting that he didn't put even a fiancé in that category. So not only was...
Right, it sounded like emergency leave
was for like the death of your parent or
right.
or wife or, husband. That's what it sounded. It sounded very immediate. And so it wasn't enough that she was just missing, and it wasn't enough that she was a fiance to qualify for emergency leave. So I think the people on Twitter who are adamant that he could not have gotten emergency leave were probably right in that sense. But I'd also like to note that, we didn't dive into this with the lieutenant colonel, but I think the lieutenant colonel could have approved emergency leave. It was just against his typical policy. He didn't say, I couldn't do that. He didn't say that. He just said he didn't fit the criteria, which to me suggested that pretty much, if you're on base, the lieutenant colonel can do a lot of things. He can make exceptions. So I don't know that for a fact because we didn't delve down that road, but I note that he did not answer with, I can't grant him that. That is something outside of my power. He said, no, that he didn't fit the criteria.
Yeah, I think the colonel already felt like he was being generous with this. He was going to let him do this, but he wasn't going to let him just completely get away with it. You want to go up there and look for your girlfriend, fiance, whatever. Maybe she's missing. Maybe she just wandered off. Maybe she shacked up with a guy. I don't know, but it's going to be your advance leave. We're not giving you some emergency leave to go do that. Now, look, he does not remember exactly when this happened. He does not remember the day this happened. So, it's not like he knows it was on Tuesday or it was on Monday or it was on Wednesday or whatnot. What he does recall is that it was in the evening around close of business. And he said close of business for them would have been anywhere between 5 and 6:30. So between 5 and 6:30, Bill Rausch shows up, says, I asked my captain for this. He said no. I need you to approve this. She's my fiance. And at some point after discussing this with him for a little while, he agreed to let this happen. He thinks Bill left early the next day. He does not know where he left from, doesn't know what airline he used or anything like that. Frankly, the story he told, just to go to whether or not this is true or not, the things he remembered are the things you would expect someone to remember. The things he did not remember or did not know were the kind of things you would expect someone not to remember or not to know. It was a big deal for him for a soldier to show up and say, hey, my fiance is missing. It wasn't a big deal when he left. Another thing he recalled, which I can also imagine leaving an impression, is at some point after Bill left, he looks up one day and on the television, there's Lieutenant Rausch. And that's how he referred to him continuously, as Lieutenant Rausch. There's Lieutenant Rausch on CNN or with Nancy Grace or something talking about his missing girlfriend. And he was like, oh, well, I guess that was true. He said he was gone for a while. He doesn't know exactly how long. It was a few weeks. At some point he came back and they never really talked about it again. And he didn't have a lot of interaction with Bill because, he's the commander.
Which makes sense because he's a lieutenant colonel. And, an interesting background on this is this lieutenant colonel clearly knew that Maura Murray still had not been recovered. She'd never been found. He felt as a parent, he expressed how sad this must be for her family and how, devastating this is. So he knows that she was never found, but he did not sound like someone who followed the case or knew the intricacies of the case at all. I think he was aware that, he had some tangential, it touched upon his life in the sense that Bill was what he thought Maura's fiance and that he tangentially knew Bill. So this is not some guy who's been sitting on, Reddit threads or Twitter following this case. He knows pretty minimal facts about the case, just the big picture, which is that it happened about 16 years ago and that she was never found. And I think that's relevant because this is not someone who has studied what the theories that people have been throwing out there in the camps and, the warring factions. He's not someone who is trying to tell a story that fits into one of those camps or to advocate for one of the theories.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. He was like, I already told one guy all this. Why are y'all calling me? And I had to sort of explain to him that, there are just people who needed to hear it from somebody else. I even made a run at getting him to talk to James Renner, but he was like, I'm not talking to reporters. So which I can also
I think his exact words were, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then I think he also said, and I don't want to talk to anyone ever again about this, so please don't give my information out, which we obviously respect.
Interesting thing about this, I asked him, I said, look, is it possible that Bill could have gotten away Could he have gone up there and then come back and nobody know? And he pointed out some things that I didn't know about Bill's unit, and that's one of the big ones, that it was a basic training battalion. And there were people, the drill sergeants and the lieutenant, who were in charge of this unit, and Bill had a leadership position in the unit. And he had to be there at all times for the training. It wasn't something where he could easily get away when the training was going on. So if he had left, everybody would have known that. He said a normal unit is off for the weekend. So, you could imagine if it were a normal unit, he could have driven up the weekend before, I guess done whatever, and then driven back, and maybe nobody would know. But because it was a basic training unit, it was not off on the weekend. So it would not have been one of those things where he could have just sort of gone off and nobody noticed, and he sort of comes back and nobody realizes that he was absent without leave. Because of that training unit that he was a part of, that would basically have been impossible.
Right. And he was saying that from understanding basically the policy that someone absolutely would have noticed if Lieutenant Rausch was not in his drill. But he was also saying that he himself saw Bill, I think, drilling at one point. And so he's saying it's impossible, but based both on the policy that is at Fort Sill, but also based on his own experience of seeing Bill.
Right. And, I'll just tell you, everything about this interaction with him, everything we looked up, everything we found, makes me believe that this is, in fact, the person who Bill Rausch went to that day and got leave from. And that after he got that leave, he left and he went to New Hampshire. I can't tell you what happened after that. And I think if you were suspicious of Bill, figuring out his movements while he was up there is something that you could focus on. But I think to the extent people have focused on the idea that Bill Rausch could have already have been on leave, that's one of the things. He was already on leave. He was going up there for the, Valentine's Day or whatever, as if anybody celebrates Valentine's Day. And he had already come up there, and he did this, and he just changed the story to make it sound like he hadn't been up there then. Any theory you can think of, it just doesn't fit with what this colonel is telling us. It's just not possible for Bill to have gone up there and come back and nobody know and nobody notice. And it was certainly the case that he went to this person and asked for leave, just as he has said. If you've listened to Erin Larkin's podcast, she has an episode with Bill where he recounts this story. It's very short, and it's basically about this. It's about how he got leave. 107 Degrees is the name of her podcast, though she's recently rechristened it as the Maura Murray podcast. But this is the story he told. And everything that we heard from this person, who everything indicates is the person, comports with what Bill said in that podcast.
And, Brett and I interview a lot of witnesses. In fact, we interviewed witnesses today. And in addition to listening to the answers that people are telling us, constantly we're evaluating how trustworthy they are and whether they are shading the truth or just outright lying to us. This is something that we take breaks to discuss with each other. And after every, I'm not going to call them witness interviews for our podcast because it sounds a little too intimidating, but after every phone conversation we have with people about any episode, not just the Maura Murray case, we do it in other episodes as well. After we hang up with the person we're speaking with, we immediately call each other back. And after we hung up with the lieutenant colonel, we called each other, and the first thing, I think we said it at the same time, it was very much a jinx sort of situation. We were like, totally believe him. The way he said it and the types of things he remembered just comports with someone who has not studied exhaustively this issue, because really in his life, it is the tiniest of blips. And he is a sharp guy. He has a good memory. He very much, I see why he has been elevated to lieutenant colonel. And everything just matched up with what we would expect if we were in his position. Someone who is lieutenant colonel, granting leave, something that is so administrative and small in his day-to-day 16 years ago.
Yeah, and he didn't remember anything about Bill Rausch other than this. He didn't, there was no like, if you imagine that Rausch set him up, somehow has got him to play a part in this story to bolster his image, he wasn't interested in doing that. I mean, frankly, the way I don't know that he really liked Bill, to be frank. He didn't say that, but just the way he described it, it was just another soldier, basically.
I got the sense that the only reason he even remembered Bill was because of Maura Murray's case. I think if he didn't have this experience of granting him advance leave just as a father, recognizing that this was a sad situation and seeing Bill on, the TV during this period when they were looking for Maura Murray and just generally hearing that this girl was never found. I think that's the only reason he knew anything about Bill. If this experience hadn't happened, if he wasn't the one to grant him leave, I don't think he would have remembered who Bill was. That was the sense that I got. He didn't know anything about him. There's no way on a base that the two of them would be hanging out. They were not drinking after hours together. Lieutenants were drinking with lieutenants.
Right. Exactly. So that's really all we have on this. I don't know what else to tell you guys. You either believe us or you don't.
Well, hopefully, the purpose of this is not to push any narrative. The purpose of this, honestly, is we've said this all along. The reason we do our episodes is hoping to shed light on facts and evidence to push us all closer to what really happened, right? And so all we're trying to say is, I wouldn't focus your energy on before Maura disappeared and where Bill was. If you want to keep spending your time doing that, okay, but I think that is probably a bit of a futile effort. If what you're looking for is what happened after, that might make more sense. So all we're trying to do is saying, when doors close, it doesn't really make sense to keep trying to open them and look behind those doors.
And I'll say this, you guys, my position on this. If you follow this, I think Maura was either picked up by somebody. I kind of came around to Alice's view that that's probably the most likely thing, or at some point she wandered off into the woods and died. And I understand everybody gets upset when I say that, but I think those are one of the things that happened. I've never thought that Bill was involved in this, but if you think Bill is involved in this, then I think Bill would want you to focus on February 9th. If Bill is involved in this, if he somehow went up there and killed Maura Murray, he did it afterwards, and he would love for you to continue to focus on where he was on February 9th, because on February 9th, he was at Fort Sill. And I just think time and energy is better used, even if you want to focus on him, focusing a little bit later in time. At the end of the day, I just think he was at Fort Sill, and like Alice said, we're not trying to push a narrative on you, but this is the information that was shared with us. One other thing I want to just talk about while we're talking about Maura Murray, as I said, Aaron Larkin's podcast now is the Maura Murray podcast. So you have the Maura Murray podcast, you have the Missing Maura Murray podcast. So that can be a little confusing, but Aaron's is the Maura Murray podcast, and on the launch, so the rechristening of this, the captain from True Crime Garage was on. And Alice, you probably didn't listen to this, but I did. Loyal fan that I am to both everything Maura Murray and everything True Crime Garage. And the captain took a shot at us. Did I tell you about this?
I read about it, but you're right. I didn't listen to it.
Yeah, he took a
shot
at us.
What did he say about us?
He thinks that our theory that Maura was kidnapped by somebody at the gas station who drove with her to the weathered barn and then hid in the woods with a gun on her afterwards is crazy. He doesn't believe our theory.
No, that's actually, I think we debunked that theory because we said that when she's caught on camera, there's only one of her. So I think we actually discussed that and said that is not our theory.
Right. That is not our theory. Now, look, I am very happy that the captain is listening to us because, I mean, what an honor. I mean, everybody knows how I feel about True Crime Garage, so I'm not gonna talk about how great they are anymore. But here's the thing: what he's talking about. We were talking with Tim and Lance on their podcast about various theories that people have about what might have happened. And one of them is the cigarette smoking man. If you remember Faith Westman, when she called dispatch, she thought she could see someone smoking a cigarette, and I think she specifically said a man smoking a cigarette. And that has led people to wonder if there was another individual with Maura. Big problem with that is there's never been an indication that she saw two people. So even if she saw someone smoking a cigarette, it probably was Maura, frankly. Even though we don't know that she was smoking. Could have just been a cell phone light. I think that's more likely. But in any event, it's led people to believe that. And so we were talking with Tim and Lance about whether or not, what would need to be true if there was a cigarette smoking man there. And the big problem is after Faith Westman talks about this, Butch Atwood comes by in his bus, and he didn't see anybody. So the thing that would have had to have happened is imagine that the person smoking a cigarette is someone who has kidnapped Maura. You would have to imagine that they sort of went into the woods and hid, maybe with a gun on Maura, and basically said, get rid of him, I'm going to hide in the woods, right? And the captain's point was there were no footprints leading off into the woods, so that couldn't have been true, and so that's a stupid theory. Well, number one, that's not our theory. But number two, I want to take issue. I want to defend this theory. I want to take issue with something the captain said. It is true that there are no footprints leading off into the woods. We don't know about footprints necessarily in the immediate vicinity. Now, people have said that the only footprints they've seen were likely Maura's. But if you remember, she runs off the road. Maybe runs into a tree. That's controversial. But in any event, she would have messed up the snow when she ran off the road. So let's say she did hit a tree. If the person just walked behind the tree she hit, there wouldn't be any footprints. They wouldn't be discernible because of the car wreck. I'm not saying that happened, but if you're trying to keep an open mind and imagine possible scenarios, that's one of them. So I understand the captain doesn't think that happened. I don't think it happened either, but I think it's worth it to sort of keep an open mind.
Hey, Brett, I just want to point out to all our listeners that you just did like the most lawyerly thing ever, which is talk forever about something that isn't even your theory, and you defended it. You're like, this is a stupid theory. I don't think it's a theory, but I'm going to defend it.
Yeah, hey, that's what we get paid to do, right?
I'm sorry, I just had to point that out and poke fun.
But yeah, appreciate the captain listening and giving us a shout out, even though it was mean. He said I would call him a son of a bitch. I'm not going to call him a son of a bitch because he's not one. He's a great guy. And he and Nick over at True Crime Garage do so much good work on so many different cases. And if you guys do not listen to them, you need to listen to them because they are the best. I have listened to every single episode of their show, and I love it. And I hope they will continue doing it for a very long time. Well, Alice, I think that's all we got. Do you have anything else you want to say about Maura Murray right now?
No, but don't come at me. I don't know what's happening on Twitter. Don't come at me.
And hey, I just want to say I love all you guys in the Maura Murray community. I know some of you don't love me, and that's fine. That's fine. You know, I think we're all just one big dysfunctional family.
I will say, you guys, Brett really does love you guys. He talks about you guys a lot to me.
I do. They're some of my favorite people.
And I really kid. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Having this much interest around a case is what every missing persons case hopes for. So, all we're trying to do is help this community along, because I do think with this much attention and this much passion, I do hope that her case will be solved one day. I think we all hope that. So I kid about that, and I do applaud all of you for caring so much about someone who you may not have even known.
And there's a lot of talk on Twitter about teams and whose team everybody's on. There are no teams. We are on the same team. The goal is the same. We want to find out what happened to Maura and give her family closure and, find her and unfortunately, I think probably help her to rest in peace. But in any event, that's what we want to do. We want to solve this case, and we're all on the same team. So anyways, I hope this was a helpful podcast for you guys. I hope this information was helpful. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. I'm sure some of you will. prosecutorspod@gmail.com. prosecutorspod for all the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Facebook, all those things. We're on Reddit. We're on Patreon. We're on YouTube. Our website, prosecutorspodcast.com also has our store. You can buy some merchandise. And just to let you know, and I assume she'll be fine with this because I haven't actually talked to her about it yet, but Alice and I decided that all the profits, all the proceeds from the store, we're going to donate to Cheryl McCollum's outfit, the Cold Case Research Institute, to help support all the good work that they do. If you guys haven't listened to our episode with Cheryl, I hope you'll do that. It's still the best episode we've done. So you just know when you're buying a prosecutor's podcast onesie for your infant, the profits are going to help solve cold cases. So very excited about that.
And just so you know, we've tried to price things. They are not high margins. The purpose was not to make money off of this store. But once we noticed that there was a profit, we thought, we really wanted to give to a worthy nonprofit. And we thought about it for just a second, actually. Cheryl McCollum seemed like the obvious choice, and we know that they could use help. So if you guys are interested in donating to her, reach out to them. I know they would be so excited, and she's even said she'll write to you and tell you exactly what she used your, $5, $10, $20, $50 donation for, whether it's like a, metal detector or a DNA test kit. So you too can, give back. I know this is this holiday season.
Yeah, so you can buy a mug, or you can just give money to her directly. You can decide what you want to do, but just know, your money's not going to feed our cocaine habit or anything. We are actually going to give it to charity.
Well, now that you've said
we don't
that,
have cocaine here.
now DEA is gonna tap our phones. Thanks a lot.
I know. Sorry. Oops. I'll delete that. Anyway, so Alice, I know by the time people hear this, Christmas will have already happened. But this is probably the last time we're going to record before Christmas. So I want to say to you, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to your wonderful family. It has been such a pleasure doing this with you this year. Really the highlight of 2020 has been this podcast. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you as a friend and a podcast host.
Well, you just made me a little teary-eyed. Thank you. Thank you for all of you listening. 2020, honestly, was really difficult for everyone we know, but it was the year our podcast was born, and all of you have made it just the bright light of 2020. So here's to the new year, and it's going to be great for everyone. I can just feel it.
Absolutely. So Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy Hanukkah. Happy solstice. Happy holidays. Happy nothing if you don't like holidays at all. You guys are awesome, and we are so thankful for you as well. That is all we have today. We'll be back next week with a new case, new answers. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are prosecutors. I'm gonna release a Christmas episode that's just bloopers.
That's pretty funny. Oh, that would be really funny.
So
you're
maybe
good.
we'll do an intro.
You know what the people want. Yeah, let's do an intro. That's hilarious. We hope you guys are, to bring. We're no Taylor Swift, but we'd like to bring you a little joy during this holiday season. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.